You've never been in trouble. You've never been in jail before. You've never had any serious, any run-ins with the law. It's a complete lifestyle change. I mean, how do you adjust to something like that? And has it gotten any easier?
It depends upon what you mean by easier. Do you get used to it? The human being is remarkably adaptable. You get used to anything. Kids kept in basements and cardboard boxes for 6 years, the first thing they want to do is crawl back in the cardboard box. Now, I don't want to go back to my cell, so I'm not quite that far gone. But it is a lifestyle change. I've never done anything wrong, including this case, incidentally. And I don't deserve this. I've led an exemplary life, what I thought was a truly successful and admirable life, what everybody else thinks is and has been as well. To be here is a shock, an injustice of the first order. I am up close and personal dealing with the tyranny and the corruption that I have warned America about through my writings and through the cases I've handled for 30 years of a legal career as a trial lawyer.
And now that you're facing it and you're experiencing it every day, I guess it's probably hard to say what it feels like when it's...
Well, it's kind of ironic because I always thought I'd like to end my career with one big case of involving real government tyranny and genuine wrongdoing that you could point to, and people would be marching in the streets, and lo and behold, ironically, I've almost got that case and it's mine. Unfortunately, when you're in jail, you don't have an opportunity to work on your case. I've had to leave it in the hands of other people. You think to yourself, well, I've heard about these law libraries that they have in jails and prisons, and geez, the machines they have. No, nothing. Here's our law library. See those 3 boxes? They just delivered it the other day. That's a current, last year's issue of the Idaho codes. The old codes are about 8 years old. They're inside that cabinet there. The law library is useless. I can't do a thing for myself here.
Are you comfortable with, I know that there's been issues with the counsel that you had representing you. Are you comfortable with the counsel that you have now representing you?
Yes, Wes Hoyt's an excellent lawyer. He's a true believer, I call it. And I wish I'd had him from the beginning. Hopefully we'll get a new trial and he'll get a chance to show what the case really is.
When you're in your cell, are you by yourself?
I've got a cellmate in there right now. It varies. They run people through there.
Do your cellmates know who you are?
Some do. I don't make a point of it. I try to duck the question if they ask me. And there's kind of an unwritten rule is that you don't ask somebody what they're in for. You can ask them how long they've been in, how long they expect to be in, but you're not supposed to talk about their case. Being a snitch is one of the big things in jail and prison. And it's so easy to get people to start thinking of you as a snitch if you're taking too much personal interest in their legal affairs.
Isolating, to say the least, your experience so far.
Yes, that's the point of solitary confinement, which is how I was held for the first year that I was incarcerated.
Let's go back to your case first, because I know there's a lot to go with, but that's the very beginning. Obviously serious accusations, and the jury believed the accusations.
Well, they didn't hear any defense. They didn't have any choice. The judge, I know how this sounds, the judge literally did not allow me to put on a defense. My key expert witnesses were excluded while they were able to put on anything they wanted. The documentary evidence was selectively presented to the jury to make it look one way when it really was another way. I didn't testify on the advice of my lawyer, who definitely didn't want me to testify, and the request of my wife at the last moment. And I was in no mental frame of mind to testify either, but he hadn't even prepared me anyway. I couldn't have testified if I'd had to. Of course, he didn't prepare anybody. He was just there for the money, flying low, quick to get out.
your expert witness was going to testify about, was it the validity of those audio recordings?
Yes, there were two of them, actually. Two renowned world experts on audio recordings. One, a forensic linguist, the forensic linguist, the number one authority, the guy who literally wrote the book, George Papson. And the other guy was a guy named Walsh, Dennis Walsh, who had worked with the New York Police Department for over 25 years analyzing sound recordings, and now runs a company that analyzes sound recordings. The judge wouldn't let either one of them come into trial and testify. If he had, he would have heard Dr. Papson say that the recordings are so unreliable that they shouldn't even be listened to. If he had listened to Walsh, he would have heard even further, because Walsh pointed out that the voice on the two recordings in many cases wasn't even mine, and that yes, it was a cut and paste job. He identified well over 300 places of what he called anomalies, of the sort that occur when you splice tapes together, take gaps out. And the second guy, 25 years, New York PD. Oh, incidentally, Dr. Papson does a lot of work for the FBI, I might add. So he didn't have a bias for me. Walsh was testifying that it wasn't even my voice on those two tapes most of the time. Somebody else's voice that had been electronically morphed into mine. I heard the tapes. We never recognize our own voices when we hear a recording. And I was physically sickened for a week the first time I heard the tapes. I knew it wasn't me, but it sounded like me. I mean, geez, what's going on here? My wife, unbeknownst to me, because they established I couldn't even talk to my wife for a year. They put up a no contact order. So I couldn't find out what was going on in my case through my wife, of all people. She listened to the tapes once, and she knew it wasn't me. You know, if I had known that at the beginning, it would have been comforting, at least.
So your contention is not, because you talk about that it wasn't your voice, and then you talk about that it was cut and pasted. Mm-hmm. I mean, is the cut and paste job, is that your voice from something else?
There are segments on there where I recognize the topic, and I recognize the phrasing. And yes, I say things like that. And those, I think, probably are me. And that's what Walsh says, that lots of them are. And he went through and identified some sections. I did some independently. They kind of matched up, okay? Where he said it wasn't me, because you can identify voice wave analysis electronically, a particular voice. And where he said it wasn't me, I didn't say things like that. I didn't even talk like that. It just wasn't normal for me.
Where would they get the recordings of you for the things that were you?
They're readily available. I decided, based on some of the snippets that I had heard, that there had been recordings made surreptitiously by this oafish handyman that we had, Fairfax, and who's the guy who's the self-admitted perp. Okay? Here we got a case with no victim, no damage, and we've got a confessed perp serving his time in jail, and they want to lay 60 years on me. What's wrong with that picture? There's something else going on. They called me the $1 Million Man down at the Coeur d'Alene District Federal Courthouse. That was the marshals and the staff, because of the extraordinary amount of money they were spending on putting me away. Why? If this just was an ordinary run-of-the-mill murder for hire case, which incidentally is the very kind of case that the FBI repeatedly gets accused of fabricating against people. Repeatedly. I ain't the first. I am not going to be the last. If it was just that, why all these resources? It's a trivial thing, no victim, no damage. There's no complaining victim in my case. None. Nobody got hurt. My wife is my biggest supporter. She knows better. Anybody who knows me knows better. But we got this oafish North Idaho handyman who claims that I hired him to kill my wife. Okay? And there were several reasons that were advanced as motive, and there were even 3 reasons advanced at trial. Let the jury take their pick, I guess.
So you think he had recorded you on other occasions?
Thanks for reminding me of that. I wondered so much that I was trying to pick up that thread. Yeah, I think that he had been recording me surreptitiously on occasion. But there are thousands of hours of me talking on the internet that anybody can download.
What's Larry Fairfax's motive here, do you think? To record you, to set you up, if that's the accusation?
Well, no, as a cover-up. It's the oldest motive known to man, greed. He stole silver from us. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know the silver was missing. I had silver in stashes on my property that I thought were safe. I had them split up so that there wouldn't be any danger of it being found by somebody all at once. But the FBI told me that I'd paid him in silver, which is when it came to me, what's going on? And that's how I first made the connection. I had my son then go check the silver stashes I had in some outlying buildings on the property. And the 3 that I told him to check were all gone. And Larry Fairfax knew about them. He knew that I had stashes. He had built some of them for me. I trusted him, okay? So my son of course, I've been in the house in bed most of the time for the last 6 months, keep in mind. Larry's been coming by every day to feed the horses and do minor things. I never suspected there was anything missing. It wasn't until after I was sitting in a jail cell, max solitary, that I finally put it together and had my son check. And yes, we had $45,000 of silver at that price at that time that was missing. That's now worth, at today's price, over $100,000. And Larry gets to keep it. Snitches always get to keep it. The FBI does that by way of paying them. But they also paid Larry in this case, too, another time. This is an interesting case, even though there are a lot of trite aspects to it. What makes the aspects trite is that they've been done again and again and again, and you keep hearing about them. And you sit out there in the real world and you think, well, geez, there's got to be a reason for this. I mean, the guy wouldn't be on trial if he wasn't guilty, would he? Well, what do you think we have trials for anyway? But that is the attitude people have, especially jurors. And just because something is trite doesn't mean it doesn't occur. My case is convoluted in a couple of ways. I don't think it deserves a made-for-TV movie treatment, frankly. I mean, it's ordinary in that regard, but it is very predictable. He stole silver from us, wanted to cover up, wanted to kill me. He put car bombs. He admitted putting car bombs on the 2 cars I drive, one of which my wife drove about half the time. The other one I drove exclusively. He admitted he took 1 bomb off, and he testified that the other bomb had fallen off somewhere. So then he apparently shifted gears, and the gear was to get me thrown in jail to get me out of the way. And boy, he did it. I had told him about my difficulties politically with the ADL, with the SPLC, with the FBI. He knew about all this. All he had to do was make 1 phone call in order to be drafted into a scheme to put me down.
You're giving Larry Fairfax a lot of credit for brains.
I don't mean
oafish as well.
I don't mean to do that. He's shrewd like a weasel. Okay, not real bright, but shrewd and conniving. I think you know the difference. But he couldn't have done this by himself. He didn't manufacture those tapes. There's no question in my mind. Somebody had to. Somebody with resources and expertise.